everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming. I am so excited for this event. I'm Beanie. I am the president of the Creative Writing Club here at UNE, and I actually founded it my sophomore year. And so I'm so excited to see it culminate to such an exciting event and such a special event. This is Maya. Maya Williams is a Black multiracial non-binary suicide survivor who's the current 7th Poet Laureate of Portland, Maine. Her debut collection of poetry, Judas and Suicide, will be released by Game Over Books in May of this year. They were one of 3 artists chosen to represent Maine in the Kennedy Center Arts Across America series in 2020. And they were also listed as one of the Advocates Champions of Pride for 2022. You can follow more of their work at mayawilliamspoet.com. So if we could all give them a big round of applause for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please give it up for this lovely founder of the Creative Writing Club one more time, please. Yes. Thank you all so much for having me in your space. I have some poems, and then we can engage in more of a conversation, a Q&A of sorts, and then we'll enjoy those cookies out there. And I hope that sounds great. And please feel free to keep track of time. If I'm going over time, do not be afraid to call me out and go we gotta wrap this up. The poems I'll be sharing do include content about religious-related trauma, specifically with Christianity, familial trauma, indirect reference to domestic violence and suicidality, so please take care of yourselves as needed. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you need to walk out and come back in. And also don't feel like, oh, I've heard the warning, I'm good, and then you realize later, oh God, I'm not good, but I said I was good, and therefore I'm going to stay seated. No, please get up. Please get up. Please take care of yourselves. And yeah, thank you all again for having me. And without further ado, I'm going to read 19 pages of poems, and we're going to see how this is. And also feel free to snap along if anything resonates, or feel free to grunt, call out, whatever you need to do. It lets me know I'm doing something correctly, please. This first poem is not from my collection. It's a little more recent, but I love reading it, so I want to open up space with it. Won't you play with me and laugh as the sun shines through our eyes and teeth, as our feet in the grass collect dirt and pebbles that hurt too good, as we become adventurers from a place of pure curiosity and not harm? When rain comes down, we could catch the raindrops on our tongue to taste the air shift, discover immersive temperature changes, use sticks as dolls, use ladybugs or caterpillars as co-conspirators, sit in a pile of mulch while we read through Matilda or Esperanza Rising, gaze at cumulus clouds that are actually giraffes or trains, embody tigers through our arms and legs, roar with our whole chests, loud enough to make the neighbors join us or hate us. Hide behind my mom's Brazilian statue we refuse to name in case they have a name we don't know. Roll down a hill just to run it back up again. Let the sun return to crisp, the mud dry and our hair frizz. Turn a park's jungle gym into a castle, a 50-year-old tree into a mountain, make the outdoors our fortress so the indoors won't claim to own us. Breathe it all in with me, won't you? Thank you. And the majority of the poems I'll be reading tonight are from my book, Judas and Suicide, coming out May 23rd. And I also have a release event May 31st at Mechanics Hall in Portland, Maine, along with some lovely poets such as Catherine Weiss and Katia Zinn and Ian Cara Elisante. Feel free to come to that next month. In the meantime, I'm going to be reading a lot of poems from this book. Google search history, age 15. How do I spell masturbate? Does masturbating cause STDs? Does masturbating count as sex? Does masturbating to girls make me like girls? What does the Bible say about masturbating? How long does it take to fall in love? When is the best time to say, I love you? What is love? Who can love me? How do I know I'm depressed? How do I know I need medication? How do I not kill myself? What is another word for killing yourself? How many people have killed themselves? What does the Bible say about killing yourself? Thank you. This next poem, in the book, they're all separated into different parts, like enmeshed in the book as a whole, but I wanted to read all of those short parts as a whole together. Each of those short increments have the same title as well, so I'm going to introduce it with the title, all of it. If you stop crying, it won't hurt as much. It's another Saturday night when Pour Me a Shot of Whiskey plays on my grandmother's stereo as she, my mother, my aunt, my uncle, and my play cousins are drinking in the dining room. 8-year-old me runs to the dining room crying from another headache. My aunt rushes me to the shower and runs out for Advil to help me feel better. My aunt is the first to teach me that the more I cried, the more it would hurt. It is summer vacation, and it is time to move boxes out of our blue house in Charlotte and into a white U-Haul for a red brick house in Greensboro. 15-year-old me feels the sweat and heavy breath hold my body captive. I continue to rush as I lift, walk, drop, repeat with as much helpful precision as I can, despite the tears constantly dripping down my face. My stepdad and my mother laugh at me. They tell me that if I stop crying, my body wouldn't hurt as much. It is early fall, and 19-year-old me and my boyfriend sit on a long, thin dorm bed. My poster of a rainbow-painted bird has better eye contact with him than I do. My boyfriend tells me to stop being manipulative with my tears. I try to stop crying so his words won't hurt as much. It is another Monday night when my computer screen glows with my therapist giving me eye contact through her red rectangular glasses. 25-year-old me uncrosses their legs and faces her. My therapist reminds me how I need to let her know what's coming up for me, to name my needs. The tears make my eyes fucking hurt. My chest feels lifted. Thank you. This next poem, I usually read it at the first of sets because it's the very first poem in the book, but I'm going to read it now because I wanted to read that other poem first. It's called In the Beginning. In the beginning, God was bored, lonely, and loving enough to allow himself to pull the glittery Big Bang from his sleeve. Lucifer was bored too, but while not too far from God, he liked the loneliness of the darkness. God said, "Let there be light," when he created the day and proclaimed it good. Lucifer thought his name provided enough light. On the day God created Adam, Lucifer questioned his own enoughness. When God did not want man to be alone and made a companion for Adam, Lucifer became jealous, bitter. When Adam and Eve were kicked out of Eden, Lucifer did not expect to be cursed too, to be alone and God having more than enough friends. I'll show him, thought Lucifer. On the 12th day, Lucifer changed his name to Satan and proclaimed it good. On the 1096th day, Satan challenged God to show how hopeless humans are through Job, proved to him that slinging out creation was never a good idea. God, righteously cocky, said, "Bet." God won, and it was good. Satan rubbed his hands together and got to work. Try again. On the 260,666th day, Satan created white supremacy, the DSM, transphobia, continued to trick scattered humans into believing any room for sorrow becomes a room for damnation. Sitting back on his recliner, engulfed by flames, he enjoyed witnessing humans shout at God from afar. Satan's favorite saying humans created for him is, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was making the world believe he didn't exist." On the trillionth day, Satan continues to destroy and confuse humans to get that original loneliness back. And he finds it oh so good. Thank you. So the poetry collection is called Judas and Suicide because the main centerpiece of the book are a collection of poems responding to a specific Bible verse as it relates to suicide, whether it's an attempt, a completed suicide, or suicidal ideation. So before each of those related poems, I'll read the title, I'll read the epigraph, which is the verse that I'm responding to, and then reading the poem. This particular one, called Jonah, Suicide, and God Doesn't Give You Any More Than You Can Handle, is inspired by the lovely poet Rach Jackson. Would highly recommend her collection, Even the Saints Audition. Jonah, Suicide, and God doesn't give you any more than you can handle. So now, Lord, kill me instead, because I would rather die than live. The book of Jonah, chapter 4, verse 13. God has given Jonah a lot he couldn't handle. That's why when he had to go to Nineveh, he tried his best to avoid it. God has given me a lot I couldn't handle. That's why when I had to go to therapy, I tried my best to avoid it. God has given Jonah a lot he couldn't handle. That's why he thought to end his life before the great fish could. God has given me a lot I couldn't handle. That's why I thought to end my life before the great fish called life could. God has given Jonah a lot he couldn't handle. That's why when the people of Nineveh wouldn't listen, he questioned why he didn't avoid them. God has given me a lot I couldn't handle. That's why when the people of my family wouldn't listen, I questioned why I didn't avoid them. God has given Jonah a lot he couldn't handle. That's why he thought of ending his life again after the great fish couldn't. God has given me a lot that I couldn't handle. That's why I thought of ending my life again after the great fish called life couldn't. God allowed our fish to swallow us whole. Oh, thank you. Need my water closer. Curses, suicide, and just pray about it. So the unclean spirits came out and went into the pigs. Then the herd rushed down the steep slope into the lake, and about 2,000 were drowned in the lake. The book of Mark, chapter 5, verse 13. I jump off and hold my breath. There on the hillside, a great herd of pigs was feeding. My father asks, "Can you focus?" And the demonic spirits begged him, "On having fun today at the lake house, there is trouble in your spirit. Send us into the pigs. Let us enter them." Bubbles rev through my nose as I sink. My father says, "You can't change the past. Jesus gave them permission." He never says that when I describe a positive memory to him. So the unclean spirits came out and went into the pigs. I want to keep myself from floating up. I try to hold it all in so the lake can swallow me. Then the herd rushed down the steep slope into the lake. The coward in me returns for air. My dad affirms, "Curses can be broken. Just pray about it." I did not conjure my depression. I do not tell him there is little to no correlation between prayer and wellness. I ask if we can go swimming again tomorrow afternoon. And about 2,000 were drowned in the lake. Thank you. Yeah, you do. Yeah. And this is the title poem, Judas and Suicide. So Judas threw the silver coins into the temple and left. Then he went out and hanged himself. The book of Matthew, chapter 27, verses 3 through 5. My grandmother thought women with mental illnesses in our family were like Judas. Judas, cowardly, betrayer of the disciples, betrayer of Jesus, hanged himself not for being sorry, but to escape blame. Jesus died for our sins, while Judas died by his. Despite clear scripture of Judas's death, there are blurred lines in between where his death is viewed as a sin, like his duplicity. He killed Jesus and himself. Thou shalt not kill, right? My cousin has bipolar disorder. After her attempt, my grandmother thought she was cowardly, betrayer of the family, betrayer of my grandmother, took pills as a way out. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I mentioned my attempt. My grandmother says, I'm not like my cousin, a problem child, always going through something, craving her big escape. I have it together, always keeping busy. I stay away from making mistakes. I ask, are you sure? My grandmother doesn't understand. She thought things were going well for me. Why would I want to hurt her by hurting myself like that? We did not think of our attempts as a way to escape our grandmother or our family. We thought of our attempts as a way for our family to escape us. We thought it was the most selfless gift we could give. Thank you. This next poem, I give huge credit to my lovely editor, Sarah May, because this poem came much later in the collection, because they were like, this collection's almost there. There's something missing, and then I had mentioned to them how I have so many mixed feelings about the CDC reporting on Black people, and they were like, right about that. And this poem is called "It Hurts a Lot More When the Reports Are Right." I attempted suicide when I was 15. Suicide rates rise in a generation of Black youth. Feels like a punch in the gut. Higher prevalence of sexual assault amongst transgender and non-binary adolescents. Feels like a kick in the cunt. LGBTQ+ rates of suicide, especially amongst youth, are disproportionately higher than cisgender heterosexual individuals. Feels like a personal attack. But when I read that Black people's suicide rate is still lower than the overall population's because of faith-based outreach, I wonder how many of us are more pressured into leaving our urgent questions unanswered? How many of us are more pressured into leaving our urgent healing underwhelmed? How many of us are more pressured into staying alive quietly? How many of us are more pressured into staying alive than not? Thank you. Whew. I hope folks are remembering to breathe. Please don't forget to breathe. That's also a reminder for myself. This next one is a villanelle. It's called "Have I Forgiven You?" My capacity to forgive you fluctuates. There are days I don't even think about you, though the strongest memory of harm recapitulates. Now when my mind is triggered, my body no longer frustrates. At least not all the time. I can't completely erase you. My capacity to efface you fluctuates. It is a calmer day when I can feel great, when I feel I can honestly pray for you. Though it's still hard when the strongest memory of harm recapitulates. I am learning how to only pray in an honest state of mind. It gives me comfort to know how you're doing or living as life non-linearly fluctuates. I'm still reconditioning how memory invalidates me while making sure to validate you. It surprises me when legitimately kind memories of you recapitulate. Living a life without you is one I don't believe complicates my need for affirmation, and I believe I will slowly forgive you. My capacity to forgive you fluctuates because of all the echoes of you that recapitulate. Thank you. Sharing this next one because I love the title so much, and this poem would not have existed without this lovely retreat called the Words of Fire Retreat that's held for writers of color, particularly writers of color who are of marginalized genders in Maine, and I'm very grateful for the workshop that made this piece exist. The devil is concerned with more pressing matters than my mental health issues. I won't deny. He sure has been the ghostwriter of most of the DSM, transforming transness into evil, corrupt contagion, softening the blow of racism by labeling it aimless. I won't lie. A theologian once described Jesus as his favorite ex-boyfriend who checks in. I thought my least favorite was the devil with his unwelcome arrival in spirit. But he is way too busy to be the spirit that possesses me. The devil has an apocalypse to plan, filled with red-orange flames from the arrows of trusty horsemen, a supremacist army with desire for hell's manifest destiny, eugenic colonial power. He has other curses to conjure that have zero correlation with mental illness. Emotions do not equate an ailment. There's a difference between the thoughts I can control and the thoughts I cannot. Yes, pray for me. Only pray the right one next time. Thank you. I have 5 poems left. How are we doing on time? All right. This next poem is actually in my second collection that is coming out in October. It is called Refused a Second Date, and it's about mental health and first date impressions and intergenerational dating patterns. This poem is for my mom. Contradictions of my mother. Don't judge your father. Do judge your father because you now have more permission and agency than I ever will. Don't hit people if they hit you first. Do hit people back. I might question your level of self-esteem if you won't defend yourself. Don't tell me about therapy. Don't allow men to hurt you. Do allow this new man in our lives to say the things he wants to say because it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. Do communicate with me your problems. Don't communicate your problems when your stepdad is around. He'll use them against you. Do take words seriously. Don't take your stepdad's words, attitude, or his hands seriously. Don't tell me about therapy. Don't tell me about therapy. Don't tell me about therapy. Do tell me about therapy. You seem to be doing better. Don't remind me of my mistakes. Don't remind me of my mistakes. Don't remind me of my mistakes. Do remind me of my mistakes. We move out and leave your stepdad on the 4th. Don't use swear words in public. Do use swear words to express yourself. You write in that damn book so much. I trust you to use those words with me. Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. Don't tell me it was your fault either. Do forgive him. Don't forget what he's done. I know I won't. Don't tell me I'm the best or that you love me. Do tell me you love me, because it lets me know that we're getting better and that I love you too. Thank you. Now we are back to Judas and Suicide poems. And I had an honor to read a version of this poem, or recite a version of this poem at the TEDx conference last year. and that has felt really good. And so it's nice to know that there's video footage of me performing a version of this poem. But I edited it to make it a huzzle, because yay form. When having suicidal thoughts again, remind yourself of how much it hurt when loved ones attempted to be dead. Remind yourself of how much it hurt when loved ones became dead. Remind yourself of how when your best friend attempted, you told them you want to run out of poems for the dead. Remind yourself of how you told them you will not write a poem for them if they are dead. Remind yourself, Maya, of how your best friend will not write a poem for you if you are dead. Thank you. I actually went to this friend's wedding over the weekend, and there were so many tears, and like a constant phrase we often say to each other is, "Hey, shout out to us for not killing ourselves." And at the wedding, I got to hold them for a very long time and just go like, "I'm so proud of you for you being alive, to see you in this moment with someone who loves you." And they're like, "I'm proud of you for being alive in this moment so you can see me be held by someone who loves me." This next poem is called "I Am Living for This." Did you know children have suitcases now that can operate as scooters? Red and blue zipping through DCA. What a way to pass the time of a layover. I am so in love with that woman's braids. What I'd give to feel fingers crafting from my scalp to my ends, to feel like a visual work of art, a masterpiece. The sweetness of the frosting of a strawberry donut. Are you kidding me? So good. I have 2 more pages of this book left, and it's always exciting to start a whole new collection. My big purple backpack fit in the overhead bin this time. Hallelujah. No forcing or stuffing today. My partner and I watched the next episode of Feel Good, and it is stunning. Neither of us are even aware of the crying that's going to come 4 episodes later. The closest thing to transformative justice on screen. Justice has to come from the internal, too. It is less humid in Portland, praise be. Praise be to the gentle sun and the on-time Lyft driver with the clean vehicle. Praise be to the pink blossoms we witness on the drive home. Praise be to the warm shower and Garnier Fructis conditioner. Praise be to rest, real rest. I am living for all of this. Praise be to being alive so I didn't miss it. Thank you. Got 2 more. Samson and suicide. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." He pushed hard, and the temple collapsed on the rulers and all the people in it. He killed many more people in his death than he had killed during his life. The book of Judges, chapter 16, verse 30. From the moment Samson had his hair cut, he let go of his strength, his sheets, his lion carcass trophy, his indulgence in honey, his riddles, his ex's tears, his kingdom, his team of fellow soldiers, his parents' respect, his ropes, his shackles. He took people with him and was praised for it. I thought that cutting my hair would help me let go. I refused to take anyone with me. Thank you. This last one is inspired by a lovely poet named Lindsay Young. I would highly recommend her book, Salt to Taste. And I often, every time I do a reading with this poem, I always call it my happy suicide poem. I promise it will make sense. Paul's response to his jailer's attempted suicide. When the jailer woke up and saw the doors of the prison standing open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he assumed the prisoners had escaped. the book of Acts, chapter 16, verse 27. Hey, look at me, man. I can't stop you from what you want to do or whatever thoughts emerge in your head. I can tell you that it is not your fault. You don't have to be trapped here anymore. Hey, look at me, man. There is a light in these cavernous tunnels of ours. Fuck the end of it. Because there's no end for us to get to. Hey, look at me, man. How about we try living? Thank you all so much. Woo! I am breathing, I promise. Breathing, I'm sipping water. I'm very curious to hear any questions about the book, about the poems read this evening, about the Poet Laureate program, about publishing, whatever folks have in mind. I'm all ears. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Anjana.
Hi.
I love her. It was beautiful. I was thinking
The folks at home.
Thank you. Hi. Sorry. Okay. I'm Anjana. Thank you so much for being here today. It was lovely to hear.
What pronouns do you use again, Anjana?
She, her.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about, like, when did you start writing poetry, and when did you feel like this was, like, something you wanted to do professionally?
That's a really good question. Thank you. I've started writing poetry since late elementary school, early middle school. I started performing more late high school, early college, especially when it came to competing in slam venues in particular, spoken word slam poetry venues. And then I decided to start submitting my poems more outside of like college journals and things of that nature. And also, honestly, it's because people told me I'm good at it. So I keep doing it. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have many questions. So a lot of writers here I know from the Creative Writing Club, also other writers. I'm thinking a lot about, I think one of the things that sort of goes hand in hand when I think about writing, which is something I do all the time. I'm imagining this is an obsession you have too, right? And Beanie, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about coping with or negotiating rejection? So, there's this fire in a writer to do something, to create, and that fire gets put out, it feels like, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Right? When you confront rejection. Can you speak to some of that?
This is such a good, I love this question. Because I submitted this poetry collection to a bunch of different places. Every single one of them rejected them except for Game Over Books. They're a small independent publisher who's based in Boston. And what was very helpful for me personally during that time, and still, because I still get rejections, and not just from like publication stuff, but also grants, because I'm trying to get paid as a writer. I'm trying to fund community projects as a writer, so I get rejections for that as well. What's helpful for me personally is having more stuff going on, just making sure that I'm working on other projects that isn't just this collection, or that isn't just certain poems that I keep submitting over and over again. And that's I graduated with my MFA in June of 2022, and what I hear from a lot of my peers a lot is like, oh, post MFA is awful because like you keep submitting this manuscript that you worked your ass off on, and like a lot of lovely authors have like stamped their approval on it, otherwise you wouldn't have graduated. But it keeps getting rejected, and it sucks. And I had a conversation with a friend. He was like, I'm not worried about you. You have a lot of shit going on. I'm not worried about you. And I'm like, oh, great. Because he had asked me like how I was doing, and I was like, oh, I'm doing well. And he was like, that's good, because none of us are doing well. Just making sure that I have other grant applications in the works, that I have other creative projects in the works, and making sure that I'm consistent with the community that I've built, especially when it comes to the writing workshops I facilitate on Sundays and the open mic series I facilitate on Tuesdays. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Jefferson, he, him. That was great reading.
Thank you.
I don't know if I have a question or not, but I'm just kind of, there was so much in my head. There's overlap of faith and poetry, and
Yeah.
how does that work for you? I mean, how do they interact or not, or what do you think about that
Thank
stuff?
you so much. I love this question. It's so nice when this question comes back again and things like these, because this question comes up rarely. So it's nice to hear that again. Thank you. For me, faith and poetry are inseparable for me personally, especially because it's part of my spiritual practice and part of my religious practice personally. So they're always connected for me, and also that's where that sense of release comes from for me as well. And it's so, I will say it is very fascinating when folks in the same religious community as me are like, ooh, this is perfect because, God is using your trauma to like gather folks in. And I'm like, no, no, I should not have experienced this trauma in the first place. I don't believe that's what God's trying to do with me at all. I don't believe in a God who wants their children to suffer. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hand off.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Rob, he, him pronouns.
Hi, Rob.
My question, first of all, like Jesse, I have a million questions. Brutal, beautiful, brutal, concise, precise, such a great collection of poems. And your delivery, after you said about the slam, makes sense because you really deliver them in a way that's effective. My question is about your next collection. So this one seems to be, this is anchored in these biblical, metaphors.
Yeah.
What does your next one look like? Is it anchored in a theme? What does it look like, basically?
Yeah, that's a good question. The second collection is more so anchored in, so the second collection is called Refuse to Second Date, and it's anchored in a series of high buns about first date impressions. And there are two high buns within each section of the book that are paired. One is in the perspective of the person I was on a date with, and the other is in my own perspective as far as how the first date went. So it's anchored in that because it ends up connecting to other themes such as intergenerational dating patterns. I'm always excited about cover art for books because, for example, for Judas' Suicide, it was designed by a good friend of mine, Catherine Weiss. And the second cover, it's going to be a picture of my mom, and I have a lot of poems about my mom and like the similarities and differences between us when it comes to like the lineage that I can't erase as far as how I build relationships with people. So, thank you.
So this is a question, Maya, about process. I'm just, obsessed with process probably as much as I am in the doing, and I'm sort of always fascinated with a writer's process, and not comparing, but also just sort of like curious to the point where like how do people go about their lives and do this creative enterprise, right? So and also maybe you have tips about how to streamline stuff, being busy and trying to accomplish stuff. So, do you have like a routine, or are there rituals? I mean, I was chatting with Jefferson, before the reading about this breakthrough I had this semester. For me, like during the school year, I'm wall to wall. Every minute feels accounted for, and I'm thinking of ideas, but I'm never able to like concentrate, right? Can you speak to some of your process stuff and how maybe that could be helpful for us?
Yeah, for sure. So along with readings such as these and facilitating poetry workshops based on these poems, I also work a full-time job at the Maine Transgender Network. So I know that I don't particularly have the same writing process week by week because I need money to live. But also at the same time, I do make sure that, like, when talking about the Sunday writing workshops and the open mics on Tuesdays, like, making sure that I have community to turn to each week when it comes to talking about my writing if I'm not writing, or making space to write so that other folks can hear it and give feedback. I'm getting so tired of this idea of writing being a lonely process. I find that bullshit. I find that that's a lie that continues to be perpetuated to continue to make people feel lonely. And so just making sure that writing stops being a lonely process has been my, to use your word, ritual. So.
Oh, that's inspiring.
Oh,
No, I mean,
thank you.
Think about that, right? I mean, like I feel like that is part of the DNA in my mind, right?
Yeah.
This lonely, experience. I go away to do this thing.
Yeah.
And I come back,
Yeah.
Right? When you're disrupting that.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you.
Did I see a hand up there? Or did I make that up?
If no one else has a question, I do. So with the Portland, Maine Poet Laureateship, how did that come about? I'm curious about that process sort of as a whole. It's a wonderful honor to have. So I'm just curious how you were able to achieve that. What sort of what it's for, I guess. Not
absolutely.
in like yeah.
Yes. So the poet laureate programs vary from city, from state, et cetera, et cetera. Julia Bausma is Maine's statewide poet laureate. She's incredible. Would highly recommend looking up the work she's doing with Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance right now. And in 2021, I receive an email from the former poet laureate of Portland, Linda Aldridge, and she says, "Congratulations! There are people in Portland's community that nominated you for this position. We have a series of questions for you. We want to read a select amount of poems. Please send that to us by this date so that a committee can review it." And that committee being built by the Portland Public Library. So I submit those poems. I answer those questions. And then 2 weeks later, I receive another email from Linda Aldridge that's like, "Congratulations, you're in our top 3. We have follow-up questions for you." And I'm not. I tell this story a lot, and Linda and I have talked about this. This is not new information. I'm the only person that received the question of how will you reach the broader community. And that pissed me off. And whether intentional or not, it often equates, how will you reach the white community we are used to? Because every single poet laureate before you has been white. How will you reach us? Because you talk about these other communities you work with, and having to answer that quite frankly around like, well, my definition of broad is everybody. And I need to touch base with my people before I talk to everybody. And there was another question about like, hey, this is a free position. What are you gonna do about that when it comes to a lot of volunteer work around this? And I was the only one who said apply for grants. Then a week later, Linda Aldridge goes, "Congratulations, you are the poet laureate of Portland, Maine until 2024. Good luck." And also like working on different programs with the Portland Public Library. In 2021, I did a 6-month workshop series with different artists on a different topic of discussion about how poetry can intersect with those things, such as racial identity, such as spoken word poetry. I facilitated a lovely workshop with Gibson Faye LeBlanc on page and stage poetry and how they intersect. This year, I'm working specifically on compensating trans poets to write ekphrasis poems in response to trans artists submitting work to Maine Transnet's art auction that's going to be held at the Equality Community Center. And then in my final term, I'm going to create a community hub / open mic called What Do You Stay Alive For, in honor of suicide awareness. Thank you so much.
Do I still need the mic, or are we good? Yeah. Okay. All right. One of the things I hear in this is, with this position, there's an agenda, right? It's a position of power in some ways, and in many ways, but it also is able to name names, like point things out, do things, right? And so that seems so interesting, right? Particularly in the context of, I think the seventh,
Yes.
right? And so there's this history to that position as well. But unrelated. So you named a couple of poets as you were reading that, maybe to check out. I was trying to make a mental note a little bit. Could you speak to poets who inspire you? I mean, it could be long dead or it could be contemporary, but just as a way to kind of seed the air with some inspirational poets that we might be able to kind of be thinking about that affect you and maybe have influenced your work.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite poetry collection of all time is In the Pockets of Small Gods by Anis Mojgani. He is a Baha'i poet who is currently the statewide poet laureate of Oregon. I love his work so much, and the way he writes about grief is always so stunning to me and complex to me. He's coming out with another book this summer that I'm very excited for him about. Kaveh Akbar, who wrote poetry books Calling a Wolf and Pilgrim Bell. I love the way he talks about liveliness in writing, and the way he talks about religion and spirituality, because he was raised as Muslim, and so that influences a lot of his poetry. My best friend Mia S. Willis, I love their work very, very much. There's a poet named Shay Alexi, who's actually Mia's spouse. They just got married, and they have a poetry collection called Unbridled, where they write a lot about space and obsessive compulsive disorder in a way that I really admire. And Paige Lewis, they wrote a collection called Space Struck that I really love. And I could go on and on, so I'm going to stop right there.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Give Jesse a little break. Okay. So my question, and I didn't ask it before because I thought maybe you've heard it a million times. I'm one of those people who loves trauma. Not having it, but thinking about it, working through it, reading about it. And in our own here at UNE, we've talked about narrative in treating or addressing mental health issues, or even not mental health issues, physical issues, because you have a physical issue that leads to depression. I guess it is a mental health. But the point is that using writing as a way to work through trauma and to work with pain. I remember I worked, and I was wondering if you have any reflections on how this book has helped you personally, or how poetry could help people work through.
Yeah. I love this question. Yes, I do get this question a lot, and I love answering it every single time. I never ever want to shit on a question that's been asked a lot before. There's a reason why it's been asked a lot before, because it matters. And when it's come to Judas and suicide in particular, what made me want to engage with it has been really wanting to get into the nitty-gritty about how my family members have talked about suicide over time. I had so many questions around why. Why Do you believe that suicide is a sin? Why? Do you equate it with a sense of betrayal? I truly want to know why. And then having the opportunity to go back into scripture, and having the opportunity to analyze that and write a lot in response to that has meant a lot to me, as well as like having conversations with my family members, and how it's been a mixed range, because some family members are like, oh my goodness, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I did not know. Call me if you need anything. Some family members who are all like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you for writing about this. Good for you. And it's like, I wrote about you. This shit's about you. And some family members going like, I think you're being too harsh. Why, like, have you lost your faith because you're being so harsh? And I'm like, well, number one, it only feels harsh because you're being critiqued for the first time. And number two, no, I personally have not lost the faith that I happen to be raised in and still believed in. But at the same time, it's like, if I did, so what? So what? The point of these poems is to make sure they're an invitation for you. They're not here to like exclude you or anything in that nature. And when it comes to writing about trauma, I talk about this a lot, and I really wish I remembered the poet who said this, because I quote them a lot. They had said, "Write from the scar, not the wound." And you've attended events that I've been at, so I know you've heard me talk about this before. And essentially that meaning being sure that you're writing from a place where you've been able to process it, you've been able to heal, and of course healing is non-linear, so there's no such thing as like being 100% recovered or anything like that. But still making sure that you got to process it first, and learning that I don't have to share everything. And I especially shouldn't be required to share things that I haven't processed through yet with my therapist or with my loved ones. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael. I want to ask, I'm not quite sure how to kind of link
What pronouns
two or
do you
three
use,
things.
Michael?
What's that?
What pronouns do you use?
He, him.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking about this question of trauma and your poetry and the role of the poet laureate and what does that look like in Portland. And I'm thinking about what kind of, if any, and I don't, are you in like high schools in the Portland area ever? Is there like what kind of work might you, because I could imagine some of the themes that you're exploring are both pretty important in that, with that kind of young people at that age, and yet also potentially somewhat, dare I say, controversial, for young minds to sort of be exposed to.
Thank you so much for that. I work with a lot of different high schools and middle schools in particular. I work a lot with this organization called the Telling Room, and they use a lot of writing programs to work with students statewide. And it is super fascinating, like who invites me and why. Because there are educators or teachers who know me and are very much aware of my work, and they're like, listen, my students could really benefit from this. Please come. We'll pay you. Please come. And then there are instances where I get invited because of the title and not necessarily the work itself. So there are some times where folks are surprised by my work, or they name things such as like, hey, could you not talk about religion in this space? That'd be great. And I have such mixed feelings about that, because on one end it's like of course no one should experience like proselytizing. No one should be triggered by religious related trauma, especially when it comes to the New England area and a lot of trauma with the Catholic Church. I get it. And at the same time, like, why can't we talk about why we're hurting and where that hurt comes from, and whether we like it or not, that does have to deal with the religion that we were raised with. So that's always been fascinating to me as far as when it comes to working with schools, whether or not they invite me simply for the title alone or because they're familiar with my work. Thank you.
Yeah, I think since we are pushing 7 o'clock, if nobody has any further big pressing questions, we can move on and sort of enjoy our refreshment area, mingle a little bit. But I'd like to give another round of applause for your beautiful reading.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.